Now, the story of the man who wanted to build a bigger barn, a bigger place to store his grain. One wonders what sort of planning permits he would have needed, which is something for Cheltenham and Mentone, where we are very much aware of the time that planning permits and getting everything correct can take. What is it that you are thinking about now that's is something that you would like? A large cathedral. Good on you, Kathy. Yes. Is there anything else that people are thinking that they would like? A new car. Yes. A new back. Yes. Yep. Well, one of the things that I've been thinking about for a long time is I was looking for a train set. So I keep looking at the prices in the shops and thinking, no, it's more than what I want to spend on a train set at this stage. Having had one years ago and thinking, well, the grandkids would love it. And maybe others in the family as well. You're right, Sally. And I made the mistake of waiting, in my 10 minutes waiting for the prescription of the chemist to go into the hobby shop in Cheltenham the other day. I went into the hobby shop and here was a train that I thought, that's sort of what I wanted. And not only that, it was digital. It wasn't analog, it was digital. Had 2 engines, track, was second hand, so that meant you weren't paying full price. And I thought the price was reasonable for that. So I bought it. On Friday, work, and in the end, the grandkids didn't want to go home. So then in the past week, I've been thinking, well, we could really do with this bit of extra track, and it'd be really nice to have a station and to have another set of points that could allow us to have the train off to the side, because the kids would really love that. It's interesting over a week as you think about it, particularly when it's a second-hand part and some of the parts didn't work, like one set of points didn't work properly. So you're thinking about ways around it and having a look online and seeing what's available and thinking about what we could do. Yesterday, all the grandkids got together and were playing with the train, and they really enjoyed that, which raised other questions of extra bits that maybe we need to think about getting to help when the little grandkids are using it compared to others. So for the past week in my free time, I've been doing a bit of thinking about trains and what radius curves do I need to go inside the one that I've got to make another track on the inside? All those key critical things, where you can get those little things that join the track together, because I couldn't find them online. So you're looking around for things. Isn't that the way things go though? I mean, maybe it's only me. When I sort of think it'd be good to develop something, you get focused in you, all of a sudden you start to think about things you can add to it, and it becomes something that you want to do some work on. Has anyone else experienced something like that? Ever? Yep. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that we can be focused on, whether a hobby is sewing, whether it's cooking, whatever it is. Who's got an air fryer? There's all sorts of things that we can think if that would be really good to have and be focused on that. And eventually what I found is that often something I really think is important, eventually I'll find somewhere one that's in the price range or something that I want. And you can then see about purchasing it. So being focused on something means that we really give it our attention and look for it. Now, Paul in the Colossians reading was talking about seeking the things that are above and setting your minds on the things that are above. So the thing we focus on, if we focus on something that's in front of us, sometimes we can miss the opportunity to be aware of what God might be wanting to say to us about the situation right in front of us. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking about photography, because I've got a photo here of 3 photos that I took Friday. And in each one, the focus point is different. So in this one, the focus point was the bottom point of the leaves there on the fern. So on my camera, you can choose just one spot to focus on. So I put that focus on the underneath, that light green part of the fern, which made the other parts of the fern and the background go out of focus. The next one the next one down here is where I focus on the dark green on the top of the fern. And you can see the bottom part is out of focus. So when the depth of field is very small, it gets out of focus very quickly, depending on how far things are apart. And the top one in the corner is when I'm focusing on the trees in the background, then all the ferns are blurred. So Paul is saying to us, what are we focused on? What is it that we are looking at and focusing on? What is it that we are yearning for? What is it that we are wanting to have, to see and to bring into being? What is it that will enrich our life? For the man, he was focused on, he wanted to store all this grain for his own benefit, rather than maybe sharing it with those in need around him. So Paul is saying we can focus on the things that are above. And then he says to do that, we actually need to be aware of those things that make it harder for us to connect with God. Things like anger and greed, evil desire, which is picked up in the parable, isn't it? Because the man was not rich towards God, because he wasn't focused on God. He was focused on building the bigger barn. So recognizing those things that make it harder for us to connect with God and getting rid of those things, but then also recognizing the gifts that God wants to give us. And Paul uses the image of putting clothes on, clothe ourselves in the new self, the new being. Because in baptism, we have been died and buried with Christ, raised to new life with Christ. That new creation that we are, putting on that new creation, allowing God to transform and change us. So what is that saying? What would Paul say to us today about us as individuals, about us as members of the congregations that we represent? And there's at least 4 congregations, for some former, that we represent here: Cheltenham, Mentone, Blackrock, Sandringham, and back in the distance, there was Herald Street and Mentone back for the Cheltenham Mentone people, back when they were separate congregations. What would God be saying to us about the things we're focused on? One of the things that often we're focused on today is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How many people are coming to church? The other thing is we might focus on, where's the young ones? There are things around numbers that we focus on because of the changed circumstances we've been used to in our former congregations of having lots of kids, lots of people. In the Ablana Avenue Hall and Walter Metcalfe Hall, as we're clearing that out, they've got those dividers on the side. Now, I don't know how many, David, would there be? Alan, how many dividers? There's at least 6 on either side. of these petitions that you pull out. So there was at least 6 Sunday school classes that probably had about 6 or more people in them. And that was to cope with the number of children that were there in church. We miss those days, and sometimes it affects what we think about church in some way, because it's not what it was before in a number of ways. But is numbers the only measure of a church? The church at Colossae that Paul's writing to was probably, have a guess how many people? Wasn't a mega church. How many people? So it met in a house, so that would limit it to somewhere between 6 and maybe a dozen, maybe it was only that sort of size. And Paul was encouraging them about growing. They did grow in numbers, but he was also encouraging them to grow as disciples. Now, I've been reading a book called Future Church, and the authors are talking about why people go to church. And the next image shows some explanation. 4 things he thinks why people go to church. And they are place, personality, programs, and people. So the place. A lot of people choose the church because it's in travelling distance from home. It's maybe the type of church that they've belonged to for a long time, and it's all about the place. Some people go to a church because of the preacher or someone else that they know at the church, someone that inspires them. So personality, someone that they really aspire to and value. So personality. Programs. Some people go to church because of the programs that are run in that church. Some people go to church because of the particular people they know at that church. So all those things are part of the reasons why people would go to church. Place, personality, programs, and people. Now, what the authors are suggesting in this book of Future Church is that if we want to build up the church, we need to improve those 4 things, build up the numbers of people. We improve those 4 things. We get a minister with a more charismatic personality. We have all these programs, we get people in and we make the place a whole lot better. And that can grow the number of people that attend the church. But what they're saying is that the only sort of growth that God is looking for in a church? If we set our minds on things that are above, they go on to say that there is something above those things that people aspire to, and it's in the next picture. And it is the vision, the purpose, the unique calling of the disciples and the vision that the congregation have. It's about making disciples. It's about growing and being renewed. What was Paul encouraging the Colossians to do? To throw off those, set their mind on things that are above, throw off the things, get rid of the things that were holding them back, put on the clothes of God's creation, renewal, and growing as disciples and going out and making more disciples in that process of joining with God in making those disciples, because we don't do it. Now, the other thing they said in the next set of words is it's about people being passionate and committed to the way that God's working and wanting to join in that work. So it's what's happening outside the church is the focus, as well as what's happening inside. Both of those are important. Jesus did both. Place, it's not just about the personality of people, it's not just about the programs and the people, that God is calling us to grow and be renewed, to allow God's work of God's Spirit within us to transform us and continue to renew us. Now, last Saturday, not yesterday, last week ago, Judy and I were at the Synod tribute service, and Peter Whitaker, who used to be the minister at Leamore, he's now retired, he gave an address as one of the newly retired ministers. And one of the things he said stuck in my mind, partly because I had headphones on listening to him very intently while I was watching the volumes for the people on Zoom, on YouTube who were watching. But he said this, he wonders whether if we had new people came into the church wanting to grow in their faith that hadn't been part of the church before, he asked the question of how ready are we to help those people to grow in faith, to understand the Bible, prayer, and how we live the faith, how we grow as disciples. And I thought, it used to be we had something that was called, now what was it? Confirmation, baptism. And part of there are times in the church's life where we had confirmation classes with more than one person. Those were times where people were involved, and you made sure in those classes that not only were the young ones, there was a couple of older ones there who could actually be part of modelling and sharing their faith journey and help answer the questions of the young ones. But see, when we haven't had confirmations for a long time, we sort of can lose track of what it is to actually help someone new to share, to understand the faith and what it means to be a member of the church, not just about attending and contributing and being on the roster, but about growing and learning to be the sort of modelling, doing the things that Jesus was doing as the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. Baptism, explaining to the parents about nurturing the children. Because we haven't had baptisms for a while, and particularly over COVID, do we start to lose in the forefront of our mind and our focus of what it is to help someone grow in their faith? The other thing is that I've noticed when we're in a time where people are searching for, they've got questions about their faith, then they will talk to someone and ask, and there'll be conversation about, well, how do you cope when something bad, difficult happens in your life? How do you draw on the faith resources that God gives you in that situation? But in those conversations often come up over morning tea. They often come up as we talk with someone that we've had a bit more time to talk with, and I suspect it's easier without having to wear a mask. In former times when we were able to share. So were there some things that we could focus on so that we could answer that question of how we might share faith and help someone who was new to the faith to grow in their understanding and experience? Because discipleship is not about learning a whole lot of facts about the Bible. It's about learning it to put into practice. And I found that there are people who are very knowledgeable in the church over my ministry. And I found also that there can be people who are very practical and are very good to talk to when you've got a problem. One group of people are experts if you want to know something about a particular Bible passage or a particular thing of theology. Another group of people are the sort of people that when you're having a difficult time, they're the ones that you want to talk to. Both those are important. But it's all about sharing and growing and learning together so that we might grow in our faith and the expression of that faith and our lived experience. And that's the danger I see, because when we don't have confirmation, baptism, when there's not as many opportunities to get involved together, do we start to lose that in the forefront of our mind and our focus of how we encourage each other and how we support each other in our faith journey, and even asking the questions and our own faith journey. Because it's what we bring to church of our discipleship and our renewal that enriches. It helps us in our connection within the places, personality, people, programs. We need that, but you need that to flow into it. So it's more than just what we do here, more than just what we experience ourselves. It's God calling us onward and outward. So the treasures that we have, that God gives us, we share, rather than ones that we just keep for ourselves. That's how we store up treasures and are rich towards God. And it's only through sharing that we can be rich towards God with those treasures. What's God saying to you today? What's God saying to me?